Hello, it's Jay. Despite falling into a funk, I decided I'll do a freak out instead. I'll do the mid-year freak out book tag, or the mid-year book freak out tag, or whatever the heck it's called. This was created by two booktubers, Shammy, who is no longer around as a booktuber, or I think even on a channel anymore. I'm not quite sure. But the other creator of the book tag, of this tag, is Ellie at Earl Grey Books. I don't think she's done a version of this tag for this year yet, but yeah, she is a co-creator of the tag. I know a lot of people credit strictly Shammy, but there does seem to be another creator of the tag, and definitely check out her channel. You know, definitely one of these kind of humble workaday booktubers, not one of the gigantic stratosphere folks, but you know, yeah, one of the creators of what's really an institution, one of these de rigueur tags that people do on BookTube, and I think that we're all richer for. It's good to stop at about the midway point and go, how has my reading been going? And actually, I'm fairly pleased with it. All told, thank goodness for Goodreads. Thank goodness for Goodreads, because that's the only way I would be able to actually do this tag and with any efficiency and look back at, well, what did I read this year? Because sometimes I completely forget. So let's do the prompts in a prompt fashion. The best book you've read so far this year. There are a number of... talking about being prompt. There's a number of things that I could pick out for this. There's Inferno by Eileen Myles. Their Poets novel, which is definitely a version of autofiction, which I really enjoyed. Definitely a poet's novel in its very kind of circling kind of structure. Yeah, that would be one choice. A Royal Experiment, which is a biography of the private life of King George III, the one that the Americans revolted against, who tried to, and it's very much about his family, and the Royal Experiment, it was trying to actually put forward a model family as an example to the subjects, versus I'm going to be your absolute ruler, I'm going to be a model, and how well that goes. And yeah, it goes wrong in very interesting ways, and Janice Hadlow does an amazing job of kind of delineating all the stuff that goes wrong in what to me is very much almost a kind of a thing of how, as a culture, we like to hold up people as examples, and that could be media celebrities, that can be venerating people of power or wealth. And this is an early example of that happening, because we have such a good documentation of it, because everybody was watching this family and how it went. Another one would be The Strangers by Katharina Vermette, a Canadian Métis author. This is a continuation of her novel The Break, which was one of my favorite book reads of, I think, last year. The Strangers continues. It's 4 generations of Métis women in Winnipeg, and it's a book that really shook me. And both books really dig your claws in. And if you've read The Break, get to the Strangers. The Strangers is the family. The Strangers. Yeah, get to this book, because it is just, it's a tough book. It is not but it's exhilaratingly tough in its stuff. I really enjoyed Astra by Cedar Bowers, another Canadian author. And that is a book where the central figure is Astra, and the story is told through various chapters of other people whose lives she's kind of careens through, and it gives a very kind of fulsome portrait of someone who you think at the beginning might be kind of a monster, and by the end develops into kind of a full person, whether she's still got, you know, however you feel about Astra at the end. That was a really interesting, really cool book. And finally, probably Dragman by Stephen Appleby. She is a trans woman. This is a graphic novel where the main character discovers when they put on women's clothing, they gain superpowers, the ability to fly, and it's sort of a superhero origin story, but it's also dealing with how especially probably even now, but especially kind of earlier, like I think of like 80s or 90s, you had to have a bit of a secret identity to be able to survive as someone who wasn't straight, cis person in this being English society. So it's got the superhero combined with a kind of a trans story about kind of getting to accept yourself, and also to do the battle against people who do not accept you. I think yeah. So that was all those ones. Somewhere in there is the best book. I don't know what they've all got their best parts for it. Number 2, the best sequel you've read so far this year. I've only read a couple of sequels. Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline definitely was Ready Player 1 was the zeitgeist of 80s nostalgia. I was a kid in the 80s, so I was sort of confused, like, why is this a YA novel for nostalgia for the 80s? But, you know, obviously Ernest Cline hit something there and wrote it very big for a while until it's kind of crashed down. Ready Player 2 is sort of the same thing over again, didn't really particularly, is trying to learn maybe some of the mistakes that they made in the first one of following too closely to an 80s the girl is the reward plot, but doesn't particularly succeed. Gareth L. Powell, I read his Ember of Wars series in the last while, and that was I have to say is a bit of a mistake. It was an experiment of like, oh, instead of reading one book in a trilogy, I'm just going to read all 3 books in a trilogy. Unfortunately, I picked a trilogy that I didn't like that much, that I thought started out okay and then just went downhill from there. It's a book that is trying to wrap its arms around the idea of how to deal with peace after there has been war. But Gareth L. Powell can write a really good silly book, but he cannot write a serious book with, you know, serious quotations about war. He cannot do that. It's just he's battling against instincts which he should have talking monkeys. His Macaque series I kind of enjoyed back in the day. That's an older series from him, but that was about a talking monkey who smoked a cigar and you know, got into daring do battles. That I think is much more of a strength. This was I did not think it succeeded at all. So I guess that would probably mean that Joe Abercrombie's A Little Hatred, which is a start of a new series, but is technically a follow-up of his grim, dark First Law trilogy of, you know, swords and sorcery and stuff like that. That series, it's a, you know, I think there's still going to be, I feel like a lot of the characters that you loved in the first one are aged out or dead because of the events of the first trilogy. Yeah, that would be, I guess, is the one, but yeah, not so great for sequels this year. Number 3 and number 4 are, because you're cutting edge booktuber, you would know about the new releases and stuff like that. A new release that I haven't read this year. I haven't read this year, but you want to for number 3. I don't really have one. Most anticipated release for the second half of 22. I can't answer this because I pre-ordered a book about the history of YouTube, which I still haven't looked up and seen what it's called, but it's pre-ordered. It's going to be coming in. I probably heard about it from Steve Donahue because he's somebody who would know about what's going on. And if he hasn't gotten it into his hands immediately, he actually wouldn't have read it yet. He'll have read everything otherwise. So yeah, that would be that. Whatever that book is, I'll have to look it up and put it in the notes of what the hell that book is. Number 5, the biggest disappointment of this year was probably The Conjoined by Jen Sofong Lee, another Canadian author, and actually a CBC broadcaster at one point. And it's one of these books of, it's sort of going for being ambiguous literature, but it was really kind of more of a thriller that I can take if one thing is unresolved and like, okay, that's the mystery, but everything seemed to be unresolved by the end of this book. The mystery of the girls that are kind of the center thing of this isn't resolved, and the main character doesn't make a decision about their own life at the end of the book, and I found that very frustrating, and I don't think that was actually intentional on the author's point. I just found the book just unsatisfying by the end. It's like, you need to make a decision. You need to make some decisions here because you're the storyteller. And if you don't make any decisions, it's like, and I mean, a part of that was, the point was the main character didn't make any decisions. It's like, yeah. So that was my disappointment. I don't have like, oh, I love this author, but they let me down sort of stuff. It's like, no, it's like, I'm reading this book, I'm going along, and the book, the book disappointed me. So yeah. Number 6, the biggest surprise this year would be Dragman by Stephen Appleby. Her book is one that I just discovered on the shelves of my local library. That's how I'm reading graphic novels. They're too expensive for me to buy. I don't have any electronic device where I could just, you know, big enough to put it on. So I get them hard. I get the hard copies, and I just happened to see Dragman on the shelf, and it was like, oh, there's a woman flying at the top of a building at the top of this book, and it's called Dragman. That's an interesting title. Okay, I'll try this, and I was just delighted. So that was my biggest surprise for the thing, because it was just like one of those a browse read, which we don't get a lot of nowadays. A lot of times you have to, you know, I don't visit bookstores a lot anymore. It's more like, oh, I'm flicking online, or you know, I hear about a book from a fellow booktuber, and that kind of strikes my fancy, and I investigate, but I always know something going in, and this one I didn't know anything. I just like, oh, that's an interesting looking cover, I'll grab that and read it. And that's the joy of going to a library. It's like, okay, if I don't like it, I just put it back. I'm not out hard cash or anything like that. Number 7, your favorite new author. I think I will go with Candy Carty-Williams, whose Queenie I read this year. It is a book about a young woman who's suffering from seems like kind of an anxiety disorder and sort of intimacy problems about, like, you know, who is she choosing as partners, who do you think she's worthy of, and it's, yeah, this young black woman in London, and it was a book that just really kind of transported me to a different world, a different viewpoint, and I really enjoyed that. I think the book got a lot of criticism because she makes a lot of horrible decisions. She is a very flawed character, but I thought that was done well and in a really engaging way, and it was fair to her. It was fair to Queenie. So I'm looking forward to trying another book from Carty-Williams. Yeah. For number 8 and number 9, I'll kind of put them both together, which is, number 8 is your newest fictional crush and your newest favorite character. And I'll put that as Zulika from Evaristo God damn it. Just pause. Almost had it. Bernardine Evaristo's The Emperor's New Babe. The Emperor's Babe, not the Emperor's New Babe. Getting the The Emperor's New Groove. Zulika from The Emperor's Babe. She is another young black woman in London, but this time quite young as the story starts in 3rd century AD or BC, one of those, where the Romans are in control of London, and the whole book is told in verse, and you really get kind of the voice and vibrancy of this London native, black people in London. This early, it's like, this is Bernardine Evaristo definitely has a project of, hi, I'm an English person, and this is my fucking country. Fuck off, people who maybe don't think that. But it's just it's a great character study of this young woman who wants to be a poet, who gets taken up by by an emperor at the time who was also not a white person, whatever white means, and white has meant many different things over history. Yeah, I really enjoyed her. Her voice really shines out through the verse that Bernardine Evaristo tells that story with. I have to try some more books by Bernardine Evaristo. That's the only one of hers I have read so far. So yes. So number 10, a book that made you cry this year. That would be The Strangers by Katharina Vermette. I don't know if it made me cry, but it's like, it's a book that shook me. That 4 generations of Métis women in Winnipeg, the continuation, a companion to Vermette's The Break, especially Phoenix, the story of Phoenix in there, but all the women, you know, sisters, mother, grandmother, really involving story. Really just hooked me in. So well done. It's one of those things of like, I mean, actually, God damn it. Okay, I need to go back because The Strangers is technically a sequel. So I read the best sequel this year, which is The Strangers, which is definitely a sequel or a companion to The Break, but really also stands out on its own. It is interesting how there's major revelations that happen in The Break, which reverberate that reverberate heavily in The Strangers, but isn't actually spoken. It's something just so horrible it isn't even spoken in The Strangers, which gives it a strangely even more of a power over the characters in The Strangers. It's like, oh, such a good book, So yes, the book that shook me and the book that's actually the best sequel that I read this year, if it's indeed is what you would call a sequel. Book that made you happy this year, that would be Crazy in Ignatiev, the Ancient Love Letters and Ancient Bricks by George Harriman. It's a collection of Sunday cartoons, big broadsheet of the time. This is was it 1927 to 1928 is where it's collecting. And I mean, it's that thing about Sunday cartoons. There's something about memories of you'd get them as a kid and you'd settle down and you'd read them, and it does actually bring that to it. It helps that Harriman is doing this kind of strangely kind of surrealistic Arizona, ever-changing vistas in the background, with this kind of weird love story between this cat and mouse and the officer who's trying to break up this masochistic kind of love triangle, masochistic and sadistic love triangle. It is sweet, and it definitely makes me smile. Number 12, the most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year. I'll just go with this one. I don't know if you know, beautiful books. I understand that books are beautiful, but it's just not really particularly focused for me. So yeah. Number 13, what do you need to read by the end of the year? I need to read books that make me happy, make me cry, shake me, leave me change, or in the end will just get me through the year. These are books are lifeboats that I step from one to another and one to another. And when I step off the final one and sink down, that'll be it. Will be done as a being on this planet. So that's what I need to. Those are all the books that I need to read this year, whether they're crappy or amazing. I need them. I need them all in a very deep way. All right, I've been Jay. This has been the mid-year book freakout tag. Thank you to Shami, wherever you are, and thank you to Ellie at Earl Grey Books for creating this tag. It's a nice little signpost that says, hey, I've made it halfway through 2022. I've been Jay. More videos later.